In this day and age, it is very, very, very hard for me to believe that Wind Waker was at one point a disliked game. All I ever hear when it comes to Wind Waker discussion is how the game was initially super disliked when it was first shown off. How people were expecting a grand new realistic Zelda. How Nintendo was going to double down on the realism from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and really make a cutting edge, realistic fantasy open world sort of action game. And what we got instead was Wind Waker, a sort of Miyazaki film inspired ocean exploring pirate adventure with a very visually different art style. Like this was during a time where everyone was emphasizing realism, where they were emphasizing like making things as dark and brooding as possible, when most games were becoming more and more adult and more mature. Like Grand Theft Auto was coming out around this time, and Wind Waker opted instead to go for a more childlike, whimsical approach. And at the time, I think a bunch of older fans were put off by it and thought it would like be terrible and be disappointing. And this has to be the earliest example of Nintendo just blowing out its critics with absolutely no effort at all. Because Wind Waker is not only a good game, it's probably one of the most stylistically pleasing games I've ever experienced. Like a game with some of the most heartwarming scenes, great animations, gorgeous visuals, and just all around a fun experience, in spite of like some content problems, namely the fact that there are only 5 dungeons and not all of them are very good. The game kind of is overly reliant on its presentation, I think. I love the presentation a lot. I love the world. I love the setting. I love the characters. I love the story, especially the story. This game probably has one of the best endings in any Zelda game ever. I still think back to it, to be completely honest with you. But playing Wind Waker today, like seeing so many people call it their favorite game of all time, it really, really just goes to show you just how you can't necessarily take the initial impression of something and make an adequate criticism of it, right? Because Wind Waker, I think that more than a lot of other games from that period, really stuck out because of this risky artistic direction they took, because of like the way they took the story and the characters, and I think it's a major reason why the Zelda formula lasted so long, like why they were able to just keep pumping out games in the style of Ocarina, because they wildly changed the way the game looked and played. They were willing to take risks, and it alienated some older fans. But at the same time, there were plenty of people who really, really loved what they were doing. You can find people now who aren't wild about Breath of the Wild's changes, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who think it's the best thing ever. And Wind Waker is kind of the same way. The game isn't realistic by any stretch of the imagination. Like, it doesn't look realistic. It's super cartoony, but the cartoony aspects really add a lot to the game. For example, the ability to fly around on a Deku Leaf, right? The ability to go up wind currents and like reach higher platforms, like getting into plants and just blasting yourself up a forest. Like this is all stuff that wouldn't really work in a more realistic game, right? But in this one, because of the way they designed the game, they were able to come up with like crazy situations like that, right? Like gorgeous visual effects. Just stunning environments, interesting locales, interesting character designs. There's so much to love about this game. It's hard to be even remotely critical of it, honestly, in spite of its shortcomings. And it does have shortcomings. Again, like the Triforce Hunt is the one that everyone brings up, but I think in general, like exploring the ocean isn't nearly as interesting as it could have been. I think they really could have done a lot more with it. I I think they could have had better dungeons, more of them. I think I think the game could have been more challenging. I think there could have been like more side content, more towns, more islands. Like there's always like it has that early GameCube feeling of just being kind of rushed, right? Like maybe not to the same extent that Super Mario Sunshine had, but it's there all the same. It is very unfortunate that it comes off that way, but this game really could have been a lot more than what it was if they maybe just delayed it another year or something. But as it stands, though, a lot of early GameCube games were rushed. Like Melee was rushed, and there are people who will argue that's a big reason the game is as good as it is. And Wind Waker, I think, like manages to stand on its own as a classic Zelda game, even in spite of all of that, right? The combat I think is radically improved over Ocarina. Like enemies have a lot more variety. They're able to teleport around. They're able to hold different weapons. They're able to. You have a parry attack where you can sort of like dodge their attacks and do this cool flip thing. It's and attack their weak points. It's really 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 cool. Really really satisfying. The dungeons. I said they were not quite as good. The dungeons I remember actually had me stumped when I first went through them because. They have these aspects to them that are kind of difficult to figure out. Maybe it was just because I was a stupid kid, but I specifically remember that segment in the forest in the forest haven where you have to cut down the flower plant and it's not exactly obvious what you have to do. Like, you have to stand in the center of it and just... I think you have to do a spin attack and take out everything on the flower so it falls down properly or something like that. There are... like, the game is really particular about how you're supposed to proceed through dungeons, and a lot of times they're very difficult to figure out. But on repeat playthroughs, you won't really have a lot of problems with them. But it was super memorable all the same, and that's something that I think the game is probably why the game is so popular. It is extremely memorable, right? Like I think more so than any other Zelda game. I can think back to like specific scenes, specific imagery, specific moments, and just see like just marvel at just like how gorgeous it all is, and just how much it means to me as a gamer, and how much it means to everyone who loves the game. Like there are a lot of iconic moments that were established in this game. This game may not be like the best Zelda from a technical standpoint. From a mechanic one, I don't think it holds up to Ocarina. I don't think it holds up to the original, Link to the Past, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, the Oracle games, Link's Awakening. I'm just listing off random titles. But yeah, I don't think Wind Waker is like nearly as good as any of those, but I still like it a lot, and it is absolutely well worth a playthrough.